As NFP Friday approaches, it's time to see how US non-farm payroll data and unemployment figures could shape next week's FOMC meeting. Talking to me now is Millan Mulraine, Senior Strategist at TD Securities in New York. Hi, Millan. Friday's data is expected to show that the economy added 127,000 jobs in August, slowing from a gain of 163,000 in July, while the jobless rate is thought to be reported at 8.3% for a second consecutive month. Are these figures that you would agree with? What are your estimates?
I think the market consensus is broadly a reflection of what we have as our own forecast. I mean, we're a tad bit lower than the market, but I think we're looking at differences of about 5,000-6,000, which is not a whole lot. But I guess the story here is one of slowing overall economic activity being reinforced by the labor market report. What this is telling us is that after the fairly strong start to the year when we were creating jobs at 250,000 plus, the pace of job growth has slowed to a crawl, so the recovery itself has essentially stalled. And while the jobless rate has improved somewhat over the past few months, we are still where we were in January, so we have surrendered some of the gains that we've had. So certainly for the Fed and for Obama re-election chances, I mean, this would be a very important report.
This data will come out precisely 1 week after Ben Bernanke noted that unemployment figures were a grave concern, yet disappointed market hopes in terms of QE. How much will Friday's figures contribute to expectations that the US Central Bank will decide to pump more money into the sluggish economy at its meeting next week through a third round of bond purchases?
I think if we do get the economy adding jobs in this range, in the range that the market is expecting, I think this is fairly consistent with the Fed's position of a slow growth and unsatisfactory growth in the labor market and the economy more generally. And it would provide them with the kind of cover justification that they would need to provide more monetary policy stimulation. And I do think, the margin of error for the Fed has narrowed somewhat, particularly given the uncertainty out of Europe and the significant risk that any disorderly impact from Europe can push the U.S. economy back into a recession. And domestically, there is the concern about the fiscal cliff. And that's why I think the Fed, not only is it looking at the labor market, but it's looking beyond the horizon and seeing these risk factors and thinking that it probably would need to provide more stimulus to generate the momentum that the economy will need so that when these risk events do unfold, the damage on the U.S. economy would not be significant, or at least the U.S. economy would have the cushion to offset some of that impact. So I think it's all of these factors in the Fed's mind, and Bernanke said as much in his Jackson Hole presentation last week. And I think looking at next week's FOMC meeting, and I think this is a very important meeting for the Fed and for the market, I think it's very likely that the Fed will deliver more stimulus.
And let's not forget, we've also got an election campaign not that far around the corner in November. The unemployment rate shot above 8% several days after President Obama took office in January 2009 for the first time since the 1980s, and has never really leveled out. No president has been re-elected since World War II with an unemployment rate above 8%. These figures are expected to continue rising as November the 6th approaches. What, if anything, can Obama do now, and how much is this playing into the Republicans' hands?
That's a very important and loaded question. I think we have to put a lot in perspective here. It is true that history doesn't augur well for the president, but I don't think history is much of a guide in these kind of situations. Yes, the unemployment rate has remained stuck. If you take two snapshots at the beginning of 2009 when he took office and now, it is as if no change has been made in the unemployment rate. But of course, we knew that it shot up to 10% and then gradually declined to 8.3%, still a high at elevated level of joblessness, which would be disconcerting for any sitting president. But I think what matters more is the direction, and we have seen some improvement over the past few months, albeit a modest improvement, unsatisfactory improvement. But the question on the voters' mind, I would think, is looking forward, which of these two candidates will be in a better position to help the economy and the labor market recovery going forward. And so far, it does look like Romney seemed to be winning that argument, but I think that would only be one of the many considerations that would be on the mind of voters when they go to the polls in November.
The US dollar has been falling this week off the back of weak US data. It's thought this downtrend could extend on hopes of ECB and Fed intervention. What are your predictions for the dollar?
I think there are a number of factors that will drive the dollar in the coming weeks. The key one would be central bank actions. If we do have the ECB engaging in massive monetary stimulus, that could have the perverse impact of boosting the euro and weakening the dollar. That could be further reinforced by actions by the Fed. If the Fed does engage in quantitative easing by increasing the supply of US dollars, then that would certainly put downward pressure on the US dollar going forward. Keep in mind that a weaker US dollar is not necessarily a bad thing, as it would boost US competitiveness. So I think these are the two risk factors for the US dollar going forward. If we do have a weakening in the US economy, then again, that would have a perverse impact of strengthening the dollar, where you have the flight to quality providing the tailwind for US dollar. So I think the traditional impact that the U.S. dollar has had from weak U.S. data, from Fed action, from global central bank action has somewhat reversed, and we're possibly looking at a scenario where we can have the U.S. dollar strengthening as a result of a weaker U.S. data and weakening as a result of Fed and ECB action.
That's all we've got time for right now, but great comments, Millan. Thank you. I'll be back tomorrow with the all-important Week Ahead interview. Goodbye for now.